What happens when a senator's own words pulled from late-night emails and private group chats prove he never cared about the truth? For Representative Jasmine Crockett, that was the turning point, the moment a $100 million lawsuit shifted. From speculation to vindication, the Dallas courtroom was so still you could hear the click of a reporter's pen. Crockett sat at the plaintiff's table, posture unshaken, eyes fixed forward. Across the aisle, Senator J.D. Vance shifted in his chair, whispering to his attorney, every movement betraying unease. This wasn't cable news theatrics. This was a defamation lawsuit carrying real stakes one Crockett had filed herself. When she named the figure $100 million, wasn't symbolic. It was a signal. This fight mattered. Outside, the Texas heat bore down on a crush of cameras and dueling. Signed supporters cheering Crockett for fighting back. Defenders of Vance insisting it was all a stunt. Inside, the spectacle stripped away. Here, only evidence mattered. "Your Honor," said Raymond Pierce, Crockett's attorney, voice steady as stone. "This case isn't about partisan divides. It's about deliberate falsehoods manufactured and amplified by Senator Vance with the intent to destroy my client's reputation." Crockett sat silent, composed. Vance rubbed his hands, stiff-swallowed, avoided eye contact. Reporters leaned forward, scribbling as if afraid to miss a word. Then came the moment that shifted everything. Pierce revealed that the court had already compelled Vance to turn over private communications, mails, group chats, aides notes. Suddenly, accusations weren't abstract. They were written down, time-stamped, undeniable. The air in the room tightened. A woman in the gallery covered her mouth. A man muttered, "Oh my God." Even the judge shifted, casting a measured glance toward Vance's table. "These aren't casual remarks," Pierce pressed on. "They are calculated, intentional, malicious statements." And Senator Vance knew exactly what he was doing. The line landed with weight. Vance's lips pressed thin. For the first time, it wasn't politics, it was accountability. Crockett's lawsuit had become more than a headline. It was alive, and as the first tranche of documents slid into the record, everyone in that room knew this wasn't just a courtroom battle. It was a collision months in the making, culminating in the rare spectacle of a powerful senator forced to face his own words in a place where spin couldn't save him. It wasn't just policy attacks anymore. Vance had crossed into character her honesty, her credibility, and he kept hammering it. In speeches, interviews, even social posts, the refrain was the same. Jasmine Crockett couldn't be trusted. The moment it stopped being background noise came not in Washington, but back in Dallas. At a community center, a retired teacher, Gloria Martinez, approached her with a folded newspaper under her arm. Her voice trembled. "I read what he said about you, that you lie, that you make things up. Jasmine, I've known you for years. That's not who you are." It was a small exchange, but it landed heavy. Vance's words weren't just bouncing around cable news anymore. They were seeping into the minds of people who once believed in her. That night, in a cramped law office downtown, Crockett sat with her attorney, Raymond Pierce, and his associates. Files covered the oak table. The fluorescent lights buzzed. "I've had enough," she said evenly. "This isn't politics anymore. This is about my integrity." Pierce adjusted his glasses. "If we move forward, it won't be easy. He'll fight back hard. But if we build this right, his own words will sink him." They discussed numbers, strategy, angles. The figure $100 million wasn't arbitrary. Pierce explained, "If we don't put weight behind this, he'll treat it like a slap on the wrist. This is about consequences." Meanwhile, at a fundraiser in Columbus, Vance brushed off murmurs about a lawsuit, grinning at his donors. "Crockett thinks she can scare me with legal threats? Let her try. I'm not afraid of a courtroom." Laughter filled the room. But behind closed doors, his aides weren't laughing. They knew Crockett's reputation once she committed. She didn't. Back down in Dallas, her team finalized the paperwork. The night before filing, Crockett sat in her living room with a legal pad. Marcus, her husband, brought her tea. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. She didn't flinch. "I have to be. If I let this slide, it's not just me who pays. It's everyone who's ever been smeared for politics." The next morning, headlines exploded. Crockett sues Vance for $100 million. Some called it theater. Others called it guts. Either way, it dominated the cycle. Outside the courthouse, Crockett stood before a crush of cameras. "This isn't about politics," she said. "This is about truth. No theatrics, no spin. Just a line drawn. Inside the filing, the language was razor-sharp. J.D. Vance, it alleged, had knowingly made false statements with intent to destroy her reputation on television. In interviews, in speeches, this wasn't a bluff. And Washington knew it. What made the allegations sting was not that Vance had misspoken, but that he'd calculated his words. Pierce laid it out simply to reporters gathered outside the courthouse. "This isn't about differences of opinion," he said evenly. "This is about deliberate lies that damaged Representative Crockett's good name, and we will prove it in court." For the public, the lawsuit was impossible to separate from the political storm already raging. On one network, a conservative commentator sneered that the filing was a stunt. On another, a legal analyst said Crockett's case looked strong, given the evidence she had hinted at behind closed doors. Her team worked late nights, combing transcripts, stacking Vance's sound bites against the official record. The strategy wasn't just to show he was wrong, but that he knew he was wrong when he spoke. "You know he's going to call this political revenge," Pierce warned one evening, leaning back in his chair. "Let him," Crockett replied calmly, a glass of water in her hand. "The truth speaks louder than spin. People are tired of lies without consequence." Kimberly Ortiz, the youngest associate on the team, flipped through a thick binder and pointed to one transcript. "This is it." He claims she fabricated numbers. "Here's the hearing record." She quoted a government report word for word. "That's not debate. That's a lie." "That's the one the jury hears first," Crockett said, her voice steady. Steel beneath it. Vance's camp countered quickly. His spokesperson issued a statement calling the lawsuit a desperate attempt to silence him. At a rally in Cleveland, Vance mocked the filing. "If telling the truth costs $100 million, maybe I'll need to start a GoFundMe." The crowd laughed, but his eyes betrayed strain. Crockett didn't take the bait. No fiery sound bites, no insults. When a reporter pressed her outside the courthouse, asking if she had a message for Vance, she gave just 6 words. "I'll see him in court." The line traveled fast. Commentators replayed it on a loop, calling it quiet strength, a signal of confidence in her evidence. In Oak Cliff, her mother reminded her on the porch at sunset, "You were raised to fight for what's right. Don't let anyone make you feel small for standing up." "I'm not afraid of the fight," Crockett said softly. "I'm just tired of people thinking lies don't matter anymore." The silence between them said more than any speech. But speeches and press releases were only the prelude. The real turning point would come on the first day of court, when Vance's defiance collided with the evidence he never wanted the public to see. Within hours of the lawsuit going public, his team had launched its counterstrike emails to reporters, scheduled briefings, and Vance himself striding onto the steps of the Ohio State House. Cameras cut across his smirk as microphones bristled toward him. "This lawsuit is absurd," he declared. "A political stunt meant to silence me. I will never apologize for speaking the truth about Representative Crockett's record." His attorney, Richard Donnelly, followed. "We will fight this vigorously. Free speech is not a crime." Political debate should never be punished with lawsuits. Vance projected confidence that day. But to those who would later sit in the courtroom, it was the look of a man standing tall on hollow ground. The playbook was simple. Paint Crockett as overly sensitive, frame the lawsuit as an assault on free speech, and rally the base around a politician standing firm against political correctness. Cable news ran with it. On one conservative panel, a commentator smirked. 100 million. That's not a lawsuit, that's a lottery ticket. Another added classic left playbook. Lose the argument, then try to sue your opponent out of existence. But on rival networks, the tone shifted. A legal analyst shook his head. Free speech doesn't protect knowingly spreading false claims. If Crockett proves intent, Vance has a serious problem. As the debate played out on TV, the two camps chose very different strategies. Crockett stayed quiet, letting filings and lawyers carry her case. Vance did the opposite, mocking her online, tossing hashtags, even tweeting. Guess I'll have to sell my house to pay off Jasmine's hurt feelings. Behind closed doors, though, the bravado cracked. In a Columbus conference room, Vance sat with Donnelly and two aides. A whiteboard covered in risks loomed over them. Here's the issue, Senator, Donnelly said, tapping the board. Discovery. Emails, texts, group chats, all of it comes out. Vance's jaw tightened. Nothing there I can't explain away. One aide shifted. With respect, sir. Some of those chats make it look like you weren't just debating her. Silence. Then Vance leaned back, exhaling. We'll deal with it if it comes up. For now, we fight in the press. And fight he did. At a rally in Dayton, he raised a fist to cheers. They want to shut me up with lawsuits. They can throw lawyers, they can throw money, but I'll never stop telling the truth. The crowd roared. In the back, a reporter quietly scribbled one word: overconfidence. Meanwhile, Crockett's team watched the coverage in Pierce's office. He's treating federal court like a campaign stop, muttered Kimberly Ortiz. Pierce smirked. Let him talk. Every joke, every dismissal it'll all sting harder when the evidence lands. Crockett, silent until then, spoke softly. He thinks this is about headlines. It isn't. It's about accountability. When those documents drop, the headlines will write themselves. Her voice carried no heat-just certainty. The contrast couldn't have been sharper. Vance loud, defiant, chasing cameras. Crockett, quiet, deliberate, preparing. The real fight wouldn't be at rallies or on cable panels. It would be in the courtroom, where spin meant nothing and words lived forever. On the morning of the first hearing, the Dallas federal courthouse rose like a fortress. Protesters and supporters pressed against barricades. News vans lined the block. Satellite dishes tilted skyward. Inside, the air was cool but heavy with anticipation. Crockett arrived just after 9, her charcoal suit marked only by a single pearl brooch. Cameras flashed, but she didn't pause. Her silence felt like strength. Minutes later, Vance swept in with Donnelly. Unlike Crockett, he stopped to grin. For reporters, this case has no merit. It's politics, not law. But the smile vanished at the courtroom doors. Here, there were no chants, no hashtags. Only a judge, a record, and words that would be dissected until they revealed the truth. At the back of the courtroom, a cluster of law students whispered and scribbled furiously, as if a lecture had sprung to life before them. The bailiff's call cut through the air. The judge entered. Everyone rose. The shuffle of feet, then silence. Pierce was first to speak. Standing tall, his voice carried deliberate weight. Your Honor, this case is about accountability. Senator Vance is entitled to debate policy. What he cannot do is knowingly spread lies that damage Representative Crockett's reputation. We will show his words were not only false, but but crafted with intent. And today, we begin with the evidence. A hush fell over the room. Reporters leaned forward, pens poised. Crockett sat motionless, hands folded, eyes fixed on the bench. Then Donnelly rose. His tone was clipped, combative. "Your Honor, this lawsuit is an overreach. Political speech is protected speech. Senator Vance spoke the truth as he saw it, and we will not allow these courts to be weaponized to silence him." He paused, glancing at the gallery for effect. The judge cut in, always cool and steady. "Mr. Donnelly, this courtroom is not for sound bites. Keep your arguments within the law." A ripple of murmurs passed through the gallery. One reporter smirked while typing. Judge slaps down Vance's lawyer early. Then Pierce pivoted. He walked to the evidence table, lifted a thick binder, and addressed the court with calm precision. "We requested communications related to Senator Vance's public statements." The court ordered their release. Inside, we found exchanges that reveal his true intentions. He opened the binder and drew out a single sheet. "This is an email dated February 14th of this year from Senator Vance to a senior aide." Pierce adjusted his glasses, then read aloud. "If we keep pushing the line that Crockett is dishonest, it'll stick. Doesn't matter if it's airtight, what matters is repetition." The words cracked across the courtroom like a thunderclap. For a moment, no one moved. A reporter's pen clattered to the floor. Crockett stayed composed. Her attorney shot her a quick glance, just enough to register vindication. Across the aisle, Vance flushed red, leaning hard toward Donnelly, whispering. Donnelly scribbled furiously on a pad, jaw tight. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Pierce, is this document authenticated?" "Yes, Your Honor. It was produced by the senator's own team, under court order." The judge nodded. "Proceed." And Pierce did. He read excerpt after excerpt, each more damning than the last, references to smearing credibility, pushing a narrative whether or not it's factual, using media appearances to make her look unstable. The gallery reacted in waves, gasps, whispers, fingers flying over keyboards. One reporter mouthed wow to another. Through it all, Crockett sat perfectly still. The courtroom, for once, wasn't ruled by spin. It was ruled by facts. Vance, meanwhile, shifted in his seat, fingers drumming nervously on the table. The earlier confidence had drained from his posture. He muttered to Donnelly, but the microphones couldn't catch it. When Pierce finally closed the binder, the silence was almost physical. He looked at the judge. "Your Honor, this isn't debate. This isn't opinion. This is deliberate fabrication." The judge made a note, face unreadable, eyes sharp. But Pierce wasn't done. He moved to another file. "Those emails are only the beginning. The communications go further. They show intent not just to criticize my client, but to actively mislead the public." An aide dimmed the lights as a laptop connected to the projector. The reporters leaned forward, screens glowing on their faces. The room braced itself. What came next would cut even deeper. A massive email thread filled the courtroom screen. Black text on a white background plain, almost dull at first glance. But the words were anything but. "This," Pierce began, voice measured, "is an exchange between Senator Vance and his staff, dated March 3rd. He pointed to a highlighted passage and read aloud. "We need to double down. Call her dishonest. Suggest she twists facts to her advantage. Doesn't have to be true, just has to sound believable." The reaction was instant. Murmurs rippled through the gallery, some gasps breaking into the open. A man in the back shook his head in disbelief. A woman furiously scribbled notes. The judge lifted her hand. "Order, please." At the defense table, Donnelly leaned toward his client. "This is bad," he whispered, tight and urgent. "We'll have to challenge context." Vance didn't respond. His jaw clenched, pen tapping against his notepad in a steady, betraying rhythm. Pierce let the tension hang before scrolling to the next section. "Here, Your Honor, the senator goes further. He openly acknowledges the claim he planned to make was false." He read again, slower this time, every word sharpened. "Fact-checkers may push back, but by then, the story will already be out there. People remember the accusation, not the correction." The words landed like stone in still water ripples, spreading to every corner of the room. A reporter muttered, almost to himself, "Devastating." Crockett sat motionless, her face unreadable. But those near her could feel the shift vindication settling into the air. For months, she had endured smears. Now the truth was projected, line by line, for all to see. The defense scrambled. Donnelly shot to his feet. "Objection, Your Honor. Context matters. These are internal strategy discussions, not admissions of wrongdoing." The judge arched a brow. "Mr. Donnelly, do you dispute the authenticity of these documents?" Donnelly hesitated. "No, Your Honor, but the interpretation, the words," the judge cut in firmly, "speak for themselves." Overruled. "Proceed, Mr. Pierce." The gavel cracked, the sound final dot. Vance shifted in his chair, hand brushing his jaw as though searching for an escape that wasn't there. Pierce advanced to the next excerpt, shorter, sharper. "If we can paint Crockett as reckless, it weakens her voice. Doesn't matter if she's technically correct. The goal is perception." The phrase, "goal is perception," lingered on the screen. Reporters snapped photos, though most already knew it would dominate headlines before the night was over. Pierce closed his binder with deliberate calm. "Your Honor, this is not a slip of the tongue, not political spin. It is a calculated effort to destroy my client's credibility, knowing the claims were false." The courtroom fell into a silence so heavy, even the reporter's keyboards still dot across the aisle. Vance whispered harshly to his attorney, "They're twisting this. Everyone strategizes, that doesn't make it defamation." Donnelly scribbled, notes, shoulders rigid. "We'll manage," he muttered, though his pen pressed hard into the page. The judge leaned forward. "We'll recess for 15 minutes." Her gavel struck one sharp, echoing, inescapable. Reporters rushed for the hall, phones to ears, voices urgent. Outside, the crowd erupted, cheers from Crockett supporters. Shouts from Vance's news anchors cut into live broadcasts mid-segment. Scrambling to air the revelations, Crockett remained seated, speaking quietly with Pierce. "Do you think this is enough?" Pierce gave a faint smile. "It's more than enough. And this is only the beginning, because the emails were just the surface. Beneath them lay something even more damaging. Private group chats, unpolished, impossible to explain away." When court resumed, the gallery had swelled extra. Reporters crammed against the walls, press passes dangling, anticipation thick. Pierce rose again, calm as ever, a slim folder in his hand. "Your Honor," he said, steady, surgical. "The court ordered not only emails, but internal messaging. Logs. These records are equally revealing, perhaps even more so." The judge gave a single nod. "Proceed." Pierce stepped back to the projector. The lights dimmed, and the first screenshot appeared. March 8th, 10:42 p.m. The chat title glowed, "Messaging Strategy, Core Team." Pierce read slowly. Every word weighted. "Crockett's too careful with her facts. If we can't catch her in a lie, then we create the impression she bends the truth. Hit it over and over until people doubt her." The reaction was instant gasps, mutters, a reporter whispering, "That's damning." One law student buried her face in her hands. He actually typed that out at the defense table. Senator Vance sat rigid, jaw locked, staring at the screen. like he could will the words away. His lawyer leaned in, whispering, but Vance didn't move. Pierce clicked forward. "But Senator, what if fact-checkers call us out?" Vance's reply. "Fact-checkers are irrelevant. By the time they catch up, the damage will be done." This time, even the judge looked up from her notes, her expression neutral, but her eyes lingering. Crockett didn't move, her hands folded neatly, but her allies saw the difference. The slight lift in her shoulders, quiet vindication. Slide after slide stripped the defense bare. She's articulate, which makes her dangerous. We have to make her look reckless. Stick to the narrative. Repeat it until people stop questioning it. Reporters hammered at their keyboards, trading wide-eyed looks. One silently mouthed, "This is huge." The defense finally snapped. Donnelly leaped up. "Objection. These are casual conversations, not evidence of intent." The judge's voice cut sharp. "Mr. Donnelly, your client authored these messages. They are admissible. Objection overruled." The gavel cracked. Vance leaned toward his lawyer, hissing low but loud enough to carry to the front rows. "There. Going to crucify me with this?" A reporter jotted it down instantly. Pierce closed his case with deliberate calm. "These are not slips. They are not offhand remarks. They are deliberate strategies crafted by a sitting senator to smear my client with lies he knew were false." "The evidence," he said, gesturing at the glowing screen, "is his own words." He shut the folder. Silence, heavy, unbroken. Then the room exploded. Pens scratching, keyboards clattering, whispers crackling like sparks. Crockett leaned toward Pierce, voice low. "They can't spin this anymore." "Exactly," he murmured. "He's undone himself." Vance leaned back, staring at the ceiling, searching for words that no longer existed. His aide sat pale behind him, eyes fixed on the floor. Outside, the news spread like wildfire. Breaking, Vance group chat reveals plan to smear Crockett. Crowds erupted, cheers from her supporters, fury from his. The barricades shook with shouting. Inside, though Crockett remained still, calm, almost reflective. The fight wasn't over, but the illusion was shattered. The truth now belonged to everyone. It felt as if the walls themselves had absorbed the tension. Reporters whispered in frantic bursts, some shaking their heads in disbelief. Others wide-eyed, fingers flying across keyboards to capture the weight of what had just unfolded. At the plaintiff's table, Jasmine Crockett sat perfectly still, statuesque. Her calm carried more force than any outburst ever could. She didn't gloat, didn't need to. The facts were doing the talking. And her quiet composure only made the contrast sharper. Across the aisle, J.D. Vance was coming undone. The smirks, the easy confidence, all gone. He hunched forward, one hand covering his mouth, the other tapping a pen against his notepad in frantic, uneven beats. The senator who once projected control now looked cornered. His attorney, Richo Donnelly, whispered rapidly, shuffling papers as if salvation might be hiding in the stack. Vance muttered under his breath, "This is being blown out of proportion." Donnelly didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the judge, face grave. The judge maintained her composure, but her sharpened gaze betrayed recognition. What she had just heard couldn't be brushed off as political theater. The jury reacted more openly, leaning forward, brows furrowed, notes scribbled in haste. The evidence hadn't just landed, it had lodged. When Pierce rose, he didn't press harder. He didn't need to. "Your Honor," he said evenly, "my client deserves the truth to be recognized." Senator Vance's own words confirm his intent. This is not debate. This is deception. The contrast was stark. Pierce steady, Vance unraveling. The judge called a recess, her gavel nearly drowned out by the rustle of movement. Reporters bolted for the exits, phones pressed to ears, racing to break the story first. In the hallway, chaos erupted. Microphones flew toward legal analysts. Editors barked for updates. Inside, Crockett leaned toward Pierce. "They're already spinning it." "Let them," Pierce replied, adjusting his glasses. "There, it's noise. In here, it's evidence." On Vance's side, aides scrambled. "Senator, the networks are already running the screenshot. Sits everywhere." "Then tell them it's out of context." Vance snapped, louder than he meant to. A few reporters still in the room caught every word. Pens scratched furiously. When court resumed, Donnelly tried to steady the ship. "Your Honor, political figures often use strong language in private discussions. These chats reflect intensity, not intent." The judge cut him off. "Mr. Donnelly, the court will interpret the evidence. Refrain from editorializing." The rebuke landed hard. Donnelly sank back into his chair. Vance rubbed his temple, exhaling. Heavily, the rest of the afternoon dragged, but the damage was done. Every new message projected on the screen deepened the cracks. Reporters weren't just recording, they were capturing the unraveling in real time. By adjournment, the narrative was clear. One journalist's draft summed it up in a single line. Vance shaken, Crockett unmoved. Evidence louder than spin. Crockett rose, whispered briefly to Pierce, and walked out calmly. Cameras swarmed her, but she offered only, "The truth matters. That's why we're here." Then she kept moving. Minutes later, Vance emerged, jaw tight, flanked by aides. Reporters pressed in. "Senator, do you deny sending those messages? Do you fear the outcome?" His mask cracked. "I won't answer to cherry-picked lines ripped out of context," he snapped, pushing past the crowd into a waiting car. That night, the airwaves burned. Legal analysts debated intent. Political? Commentators dissected credibility. Screens across the nation replayed the damning chat messages over and over, the weight of them impossible to spin away. Crockett returned to her Dallas neighborhood to find supporters waiting outside her home, candles glowing in their hands, signs of encouragement lifted high. She spoke briefly, her voice steady. "This case isn't about me, it's about truth. When lies go unchecked, they harm all of us." Applause broke through the quiet night, candlelight flickering across faces filled with pride and resolve. But the battle was no longer confined to the courtroom. Evidence spilled into the public sphere, igniting conversations in living rooms, workplaces, and on television screens across the nation. By the time the courthouse doors shut that evening, the story had already escaped Dallas. Screenshots of Vance's emails and private chats dominated national headlines, dissected live on air and shared millions of times online. What began as a political dispute had become a cultural flashpoint. Outside the courthouse, the crowd swelled. Crockett supporters carried hand-painted signs "Truth Matters" and "Stand with Jasmine." Across the barricades, Vance's allies pushed back with their own free speech under attack and stopped political witch hunts. Shouts clashed, rising over the flashing red and blue lights of patrol cars holding the line. On primetime broadcasts, analysts struggled to capture the gravity. "This isn't mudslinging," one said, leaning forward. "These are direct communications where Senator Vance admits his claims were false and wanted to use them anyway. That's extraordinary." Another shook her head. "The fact that it's in writing? A disaster for him." Across the country, people absorbed the revelations in real time. At a diner in Oklahoma City, a waitress refilled coffee cups, shaking her head at the small TV above the counter. "They've called that woman a liar for months. Now look, he admitted it himself." At a gas station in Little Rock, two men argued while pumping fuel. One defended Vance. "Every politician strategizes like that." The other snapped back, pointing at the screen. Strategizing isn't the same as lying on purpose and, you know it? Back in Dallas, supporters held a candlelit vigil outside the federal courthouse. A pastor spoke softly. Truth is fragile, but powerful. To try to bury it, and eventually, it still comes to light. Meanwhile, Vance's team scrambled for control. His spokesperson appeared on late-night news, insisting that chats were misinterpreted. But the host cut in. Holding up a printout, Senator Vance typed this himself. Doesn't have to be true. How is that out of context? The spokesperson faltered, pivoting to another talking point. Online, the backlash was relentless. Hashtags like #TruthOnTrial and #Crockett vs Vance trended nationwide. Memes circulated. Viral videos spliced Vance's words against his rally laughter. A jarring contrast that spread like wildfire. For Crockett, the reaction struck close. When she returned home late, she found flowers and handwritten letters piled at her doorstep. One shaky note read, "Thank you for standing up for truth. We need more of that in this country." Her husband gathered the envelopes, smiling softly. "You've struck a chord." Crockett opened a letter from a high schooler in Tucson. "I've thought about politics, but it feels toxic. Seeing you fight makes me believe honesty still matters." She set it down, eyes glistening. "This is why I couldn't stay silent," she whispered. The case had revealed the lies. The public had answered. Now, what remained was Crockett's choice to frame this moment, not only as a legal fight, but as a lesson in what truth still means in public life. The courthouse steps felt different the next morning, quieter. The chaos of the day before had faded, leaving something heavier in its place: reflection. Reporters still gathered, cameras still aimed, supporters still waved their signs, but everyone seemed to recognize that this wasn't just another political clash. This was the kind of moment that leaves a mark, the kind people remember long after the case is closed. When Jasmine Crockett emerged from the building, she didn't rush past the crowd or hide behind her attorneys. She walked calmly to the podium, set up for press briefings, and placed both hands gently on its edges. Her voice, when she began, wasn't fiery or defiant. It was steady, deliberate, almost solemn. "This case is not about me versus Senator Vance," she said, scanning the crowd. "This case is about truth versus lies. If public service loses its connection to truth, then the people lose faith in the system that's supposed to represent them. That's why we're here." Her words didn't land like a soundbite. They landed like a reminder. Not applause lines, but anchors. Something to stay with you whether you agreed with her or not. Behind her, Pierce stood silently, hands folded. He didn't need to add a word. The evidence had already spoken louder than anyone could. News crews carried Crockett's remarks live across the country. In coffee shops, the feed played over muted TVs. In offices, coworkers leaned over one another's screens. At home, families sat together, some nodding, some whispering about how rare it was to hear something so clear in a moment so charged. One woman in Albuquerque, toddler balanced on her hip, whispered as she watched on her phone, "This is what I want my son to grow up seeing, leaders who actually care about truth." Meanwhile, J.D. Vance slipped out a side exit, hustled into an SUV by aides who shielded him from cameras. But the damage had already been done. His words and his admissions had been projected onto screens and printed in black and white. No crafted statement could erase them. For Crockett, the moment wasn't about scoring political points. That night, back home in Dallas, she found neighbors and strangers gathered on her lawn. Some brought flowers, others handwritten notes. A group of middle schoolers held posters they'd made that read, "Truth wins." She stepped onto her porch, her husband beside her, and spoke softly but firmly. This fight isn't just mine. It belongs to anyone who has ever been lied about, diminished, or dismissed because it was convenient for someone else. What happened in that courtroom matters because it proves lies don't have to be the last word. The small crowd applauded, some wiping away tears. It wasn't the roar of a rally, but something quieter, more intimated in many ways. More powerful. The next morning, headlines across the country carried the story. Emails and chats exposed Vance's strategy against Crockett. Editorials called out the dangers of political dishonesty. Even critics who had dismissed the lawsuit as a stunt admitted the evidence was damning. But the most powerful responses came not from pundits, but from ordinary people. Letters poured into Crockett's office. A veteran in San Antonio wrote, "I never thought I'd care about a congressional dispute, but watching you fight this made me believe integrity still matters in government." A teacher in Nebraska said, "My students asked why politicians lie. I told them, sometimes the truth wins. Thank you for proving me right." These weren't just compliments. They were reminders that this case carried a moral weight bigger than politics. When asked in a quiet interview a week later what the lawsuit meant to her personally, Crockett leaned forward and said simply, "It means lies have a cost. And when we stop holding people accountable for them, we let those lies shape our world. I don't want my community, my family, or the next generation to inherit a world where truth is optional. That's why I did this, and that's why I'll keep fighting." The interview ended there, but the message lingered. Because in the end, this case wasn't just about a courtroom. It was about the reminder that accountability, though hard, is still possible. That lies lose their grip when exposed, and that courage, even from one person, can remind a nation what honesty is supposed to mean. So ask yourself, what role does truth play in your own life? And when it's tested, will you fight for it too? Because if Jasmine Crockett's story proves anything, it's this: the fight for truth is never one person's burden. It belongs to all of us.